Three, two, one. Keith, welcome to the December 26th podcast. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
being here. This one has been in the works for a minute. We finally made it happen. I'm very excited to have you on the show, particularly because your profession, your area of expertise are so closely related and timely to kind of where we are as a country. So this is going to be a great conversation.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes. So let's get into it. Who is Keith Barnett?
um, Keith is really just a kid from North New Jersey. Who grew up in an urban society and just found his way, just navigated his way through the ups and downs of life. Trauma passed down and things of that nature. But someone who now is a family man. I have a beautiful wife, amazing wife. I have two kids, and kind of just really got to the point to where I realized like I've made it out of all of these beginning conditions that I had to overcome. Um, and really now, who I am now is a person that's really thinking about legacy and how can I have a sustainable, long-lasting impact on our people, on my immediate family, friends, but just globally too, right? The last few years I've really just started thinking about how can I have a global impact? What can I do in my small little world to impact, you know, from a global perspective, but more so for those that are, impacted due to, socioeconomic issues, racial inequalities and things like that. And, just keep pushing forward what our ancestors did for us to get us to this point, right? So, I'm really trying to get it to where when I have my last dying breath, my legacy lives on and is sustainable for the next generations upon us to, take it to that next step.
Yeah, and full disclosure, we know each other personally. Shout out to
Yes.
Stephanie, your wife, who I met first as a former colleague. But looking at the life that you've built, this beautiful wife, these beautiful two children, and what you've been able to create, both personally and professionally, people will see that and say, "This is the Black American dream." Right. So it's commendable because sometimes I think we can sort of get there, and the striving is around wealth creation and generational wealth, and almost feeling like you don't have the space to solve these larger problems.
Yeah.
But when you come from the kind of community that you do, I think sometimes there is this inherent desire to have a larger impact that's greater than yourself because you have an inherent understanding of what it means to not have access, right?
Yep.
Or what it means not to be able to pull yourself up from the muck and the mire. So, with that in mind, let's talk about your origin story
Yeah.
as a child of Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah. So, born and primarily raised in Newark. To my mom and dad, they were fairly young. During that time, you wouldn't say my dad was 21, mom was 19 or so. And just really they were just making their way, right? And my dad was, when I was born, it was this transition of being out in the streets, that type of environment, and now he has this son, right? So the son comes and he has to make this decision. I'm out here, this is all I know. I didn't have a dad in my life, but now I have this son. So do I keep doing the same thing, continue the traumas that I've had, or do I try to stop it, right? So, he decided to, stop it as much as he could, but it happened over time. So, by the time I would say I was, 7 or 8, he was fully out of the environment of what we would consider like the street life. But there was a remnants that I can still remember of things, right? And my childhood was full of valuable lessons, and I will say my mom and dad, they were very good at their failures, and I think a lot of parents need to do that as well. We try to show our kids the positive, or just do this, or you just need to do this, right? Or just don't do like me. But my parents were really good. And just when I look back at a very young age, to say, look, I failed here because of this, and this. It impacts me this way. I have a lot of what ifs. I wish I would have did this. I don't want you to have that. So at an early age, that was like instilled in me. And it came with a lot of pressure because you would hear from the family like, oh, like, and I'm sure you kind of got this too, because a lot of individuals that reach the point that we're in, you feel like you're considered, like, in your community, like you're the chosen one. You're the one that's going to make it out, and you're going to save us, or you're going to bring some sort of clarity, or just acceptance or happiness to this family that has a lineage of traumas and disappointments and things like that, right? So growing up, I felt that at a really young age, 5-6 years old. And but you just growing up, and you just think this is just what life is, right? So as I continue to grow up, we moved to Irvington, New Jersey. So when we moved to Irvington, it was at the point to where, so I'm around 6 or so. So it's still predominantly white, but now it's the white flight situation. So I was actually able to see that, when I first moved there, the majority of my neighbors are white, but by the time we left, is not, a Caucasian person in sight outside of the businesses, right? The local businesses and things like that. So, it's just, I just look at, growing up, and, the different steps and the different time points of my life, that you really don't know what's going on until you get older, and you get older and you start to reflect, okay, well, wow, this is probably why now I do this, or, I'm always concerned about this when I shouldn't, but it was because I grew up this way. And, just seeing the daily traumas of, drug addiction, and this is the crack epidemic, and, just seeing how that impacts, a family. And, my mom and dad, luckily, didn't succumb to, any sorts of drug addiction, that I know of. I couldn't see anything, but, I have uncles, aunts and things like that. And you just see how it just deteriorates a person and just a community, right? And even though you're going through this, as a kid, you still wake up, you still, believe in fairy tales, you still have these dreams and aspirations. So you look at, all these kids that grow up in this type of environment that still feel like there's some sort of chance to get somewhere in life, although everything subconsciously tells you that you aren't supposed to be anything in life. So it was tough, growing up. As I look back, although I could say my childhood was a pretty good childhood at the same time, right? But that's the dynamics of kind of being Black in America.
Yes.
Right? Where you just like, wow, I still had a pretty good childhood, but it's because you don't know what you don't know, right? But at 6 or 7 years old, if we knew all of the inequalities that were happening, you would be upset. Whereas now, we're successful, but we still find ourselves being, you're just angry a lot, right? Because you just see what's going on and things that aren't fair. So a lot of my childhood, things that happened, and for me to get to where I am now, I realize that a lot of things had to happen, go in my favor. There was a lot of luck that was involved, because I look back, there's certain things where you just out as a kid, and if it would have just went this way, my whole life changed, right? But these are, the things that you can't quantitate, right? Because people always want to, when they're talking about, racism and things like that, well, the numbers say this, the numbers say that, but there's so many dynamics to it that you can't quantify, right? So, growing up in you're in an environment that you're surrounded by so many different things that can put you on the wrong path due to historically what has happened to us, right? You have to survive so much to get to where you are, right? And then what happens is you'll have, people that look like us start to say, well, I made it out, right? I made it out. Why can't you make it out?
Right.
Right. And that's that whole pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality, which I feel like as Black people, we should never have, because we should always understand how difficult it was for us to get there. So that pull yourself by the bootstraps mentality, what it does is it begins to negate what the real issues are, because we shouldn't have to go through all this just to be where we are. Like, can I be mediocre and still just have a successful, life? Like, we constantly feel that, we have to be perfect. And that's an emotional part. And that can get into the public health part as well, right? Something that you can't quantify, right? Every day you just feel the pressure of needing to be perfect. Now, as a child, you don't feel that. But
Right.
once you begin to become an adult, you start to see that. Now, I got exposed to it a bit earlier because, once I got around 9, 10, it was like very evident that I was pretty good, like really good at baseball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the best facilities, the best places to go were not in my neighborhood, although we played it there. So, I started playing on like all-star teams that were outside of my neighborhood, sometimes surrounding neighborhoods. And, I'm 10, 11 years old and I'm on a bus. I'm just like, yeah, this looks completely different than where I live. And then when you look at it, when you get older, because you don't have any real concept of like, length, like how many miles away you are from one town.
Right.
But when I look at it, this town over is only 2 miles away. And, it's completely different in the conversations that, and my teammates in these towns, also teams were predominantly, white.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations that they were having were 10, 11. And yeah, my dad, got me, stocks in Coca-Cola. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, you like soda and things like that, but not understanding at 10 years old, right now, they already have a economic advantage
Right.
on me already, not even understanding it, and it's just like, I think about those things, and then you just look back and you just like, so just imagine just generations upon generations upon generations. This is where all this wealth comes, and then it affords the opportunities for others to just do whatever they want to do in life, or not have to feel like they need to be exemplary or just excel at everything, and can just still have a comfortable, great life.
Yeah, I will never forget, like, and our story is parallel in that way of having that experience with just going a few miles over, but witnessing extreme wealth and having an understanding of disparities and what that meant, right? The same thing. I always felt like we may not have a lot, but we live a stable life, like live a stable life. I have dinner on the table every night, things like that, and not really understanding what it means to live a good life and what it means to live a wealthy life
Yeah.
and access to resources. But I will never forget being in law school and talking to a really good friend of mine who didn't look like me. And she said to me, yeah, so she was engaged at the time. My dad is really encouraging me to like get my trust and estates plan together. And I said, oh, really? He is. And I said, he's probably doing that because you're getting married. So, some things need to be worked out. And she said, but yeah, I said to him, what do I have? I don't have anything to put in a will. Now, granted, he was paying for her to go to law school, but she's like, I don't have anything to put in a will and a trust and estates plan. When I said that to him, he said, yes, you do. And I said to her, I said, you don't realize that there's money and there are probably assets that he hasn't even told you about.
Yep.
that are in your name that you will be able to avail yourself. Now, why he hasn't told you to date and you're an adult, I don't know. But that's why he's saying that you need to put a plan in place. And I remember at the time thinking, all I'm trying to figure out is how I'm gonna pay these loans back when I get out of here. And this is
Absolutely.
somebody saying to me, and my dad saying I need to trust in the estate plan because I'm getting married and I have things I need to, protect. And
Yeah.
so, but for a while you get used to being the person that can't relate, right? And after you've been in that environment for so many years, you learn how to sort of do the nod and plaster the smile
Yep.
on. But think going back to you being a child in that environment, how did that impact you from a psychological perspective? Now having the visibility, and if anybody knows about this area, right, Irvington, that area, it's like you can be in Irvington, but you could also be in West Orange, right? Which looks very
Yeah. Or
different. Or
Maplewood or
Maplewood,
South
right?
Orange. Yeah.
Yes. And if anybody knows anything about Maplewood, those property taxes alone, yeah, not a game, right? So, what kind of impact did that have on you as a child who has talent and talent that is taking you to different communities, but uncovering the disparities between your community and those communities?
Yeah, you start to ask questions, because I come home and I'm just like, let's just say Johnny's talking about, stocks, dad, what stocks? And I remember, so if I'm 10, my dad's like 30, 31 or whatever. He's like, I kind of heard about it before. I don't really know. Right. So it just stops right there, because at that time we didn't have as much access to information where now we can just go on Google and things like that. But there was just a lot of questions that I had, and and I look back and just things that we normalize in our community. I remember being 6 years old, and I'm at my grandmother's house, and someone breaks in, right? So someone breaks in, and my uncle, he's living there at the time, and this is my dad's brother, it's my maternal grandmother, and he's living there at the time, and I just remember coming out, and remember that scene in Boys in the Hood where like Trey comes out and his dad like shoots a gun. So it was literally like that. So
Mhm.
I come out, my uncle goes, go back into the room, and then he just lets off pop 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 pop, right? So mind you, I'm 5 6 years old, and this happened, and then obviously they call the cops and stuff like that, and then I remember my dad coming, right? So then now my dad, because I was just spending the night with my grandmother, and my dad comes, and him and my uncle, they're arguing because my my dad, he's upset, he's like, you shot all those times in this close and you didn't hit him and things like that, and they're like, oh, it's just like it's so normalized to where it's not even how is Keith, what my family call me Laquan. How is he doing, right? And that happens, and then it's just like, all right, the next day I'm just playing and things like that, and it's like, but those things when you really look at it as you get older, you just realize it's just it's not supposed to be that way. Like things like that are not supposed to be normalized for a child, right? Because then subconsciously it just goes in your mind, and then you're able to. What I feel like is that when things like that happen, you begin to be able to subconsciously accept things that go wrong in your life, because it's just like, oh, that's just how it's just supposed to be for us, right? And just compartmentalizing that it, and then on top of it, as I got older, having these different questions to my mom or dad that they couldn't answer because they just didn't know. Our parents, their generation and the generations before them, they was just trying to make it, right?
Right.
Like we're like the first generation that's getting the opportunity to really, from an overall perspective, like be able to kind of just excel in like life and career. And it's not just about just making it. And it was just tough. So as I got older, I get to teenage years, now it goes from questions to now it's just like sort of like anger,
Mm.
right? So it's like now I'm just angry, I'm jealous of them. It's like, why do they have this and I don't, right? And then what happens is you start to kind of resent your parents in a certain way because you don't understand, the things that have happened prior, right? And it's like we kind of go through this sense of like it's like a timeline, and I think it's so similar for most of us to where you realize, right? You realize, whoa, it's a difference. You start to question why, and then you have some sort of resentment to your parents, like, well, why aren't you like this? And then you get to the point to where you realize, as you get older, it's because of this and this. Not everybody going to make it out in all of these type of conditions. Like you have to be very strong-willed, very strong, and not everybody's built like that either, right?
Right.
But we shouldn't have to be built to where we all need to be strong just to get at a seat at the table and just to kind of be there, right? Because that's a whole nother dynamics too, right? You and I, people of like minds, we do all of this, right? But it's just like, okay, but we're really still like just at the seat of the table, right? And it's like, but I had to do all of this just to get here. And you can't quantify that, right? You can't put numbers to it. And how do we relay that to where people who do have a certain privilege can understand that it's not a thing of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There are things that like we shouldn't have to tie the bootstraps.
Right.
Let's alleviate those, right? Let's alleviate the mud and things like that forces you to have to put boots on, right? So that's what happened in my childhood. It was just like a timeline of, and I never got to a point to where like I resented my parents where it was like outwardly like just acting out and things like that, because I've always been a pretty good kid. But it was just really just there's this timeline where you're just like, wow, like, man, like, what was wrong with y'all? Why couldn't you do this? And then you realize, no, you guys were just trying to make it. And then what I realized as I got older, and then I'm happy that I was able to, relay this to my dad before he passed away. And I still relay it to my mom. It's just like, because, they also have resentment. Like they feel like they failed. And, I'm like, you guys didn't fail. I said, what you provided to me was priceless. I said this to my mom and dad one time. I said, you guys stopped a cycle that our family was having, right? It got to you, and then you ensured that me and my brother didn't have to go through the same things, right? You stopped certain attitudes, certain beliefs, and certain things of, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. And I said, what you did was now you've built a new legacy to our family. It started with you guys, because now I've taken it to this point. And my children, they have no choice but to take it to the next point. And my brother, he's doing the same thing. And I said, that's priceless. I said, when I look back, I would do it all over again, because what you guys provided to me, internally, just emotionally and things like that, you've built someone that can handle any type of situation now. And they started to realize, and then obviously, they still like, oh, what ifs and things like that. But that was another thing that as a child, they would always say, limit the what ifs in your life, and I would see that from my dad, just the regret that he had. He would always say one of the worst things to have in life is what ifs. What if you could have did this? He said, that hurts me the most, so yeah.
Do you feel like, thinking about those teenage years, when I think back to my own experience, now as an adult in hindsight, I did a lot of assimilating in the sense of trying to understand their world, their music, their culture, their way of speaking without opening them up or exposing them to my experience. And this is a lighthearted example, but I remember like playing basketball in junior high at this prep school, and my aunt said to me, "Oh, I'm going to come, to your game." Now, my mom has quite a few siblings, and my two youngest aunts are only 9 and 10 years older than me, so they were like kind of older sisters as opposed to just aunts. And I was like, "Cool, see you there." Most of the time, my family is working, so people can't come to my sporting events, at 3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
afternoon. I'm like, "My aunt's coming today. This is great." So she just happens to show up when like I'm on the sidelines. I'm talking to my coach and I see my aunt rolling, her boyfriend at the time, and her boyfriend's homeboy. And they're in full fatigue, like head to toe fatigues and Timberlands, right? So the assistant coach says, of course they know that they're my family, my friends, because there's no other black people right there. And so she said, "Oh, I didn't know you had military in your family." And, and I sort of did that like awkward nod,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
internally I was mortified, right? Like, why did they come dressed like this? Now, me now as an adult, and the way I operate now would have been like, they're not military. That's just style, right? That's just how
Yeah,
they dress. But at the time, all I could think was like, why are you making me stick out any further than I already
yeah.
do by bringing our culture here into this very white world? Did
Hmm.
you feel the need to suppress at all in that way, or sort of hide those parts of you that are Irvington and Newark?
Yeah, when I look back, I think because I was at that, like angry stage, I just I kind of rebelled. I think it was some sort of rebellion. So I really didn't suppress it. But what happened was, I think, in my teenage years when I'm playing, in other areas and stuff like that, it was like the other way. So like I'm just extra because it's two ways, right? You either
Right.
kind of subside or now it's just extra. Like you just gonna get all this now. And so I don't think I don't remember ever suppressing it. Um and I will say that I've always, luckily kind of been at a point where I for the most part, right, didn't really care how they felt about me because you're like I'm angry anyway, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
coming. I already feel like I could just beat you. I could beat all y'all up because I'm just upset, angry about seeing how different everything is and things like that. And when my parents would come, yeah, I never had those, but I have friends that definitely had to deal with that. But then when I look at like going to college, then it kind of changed a little bit, right? Because now, I'm getting some sort of like scholarship and some
Mm-hmm.
sort of money and things like that. So you do feel like you kind of gotta assimilate a little bit. So I would say, once I got to college and then, in the early parts of my career, I kind of was like, like that as well. Just not being so open to the type of music that I like and things like that, to where now I'm just like so unapologetic and things, but I wish at an earlier age, I would have been more apologetic when I was in college as well, like it's specifically when I was playing, because there would be like conversations and stuff like that, and I would speak out and stuff, or if they said something kind of crazy, obviously, because we always deal with that, right? So they would say certain things, and I would question them, and there would be issues and things like that. But that is a real thing for us, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get in embarrassed for certain things. But me, because I kind of grew up, predominantly black areas, it was more like I just my parents needed to be fly or they would embarrass me in front of my friends. So but yeah, that is it really is a real thing. But as a child, I didn't deal with it as as much. But then now that I think about it, like if you're bringing lunch and stuff like that, yeah, mom, you got to make sure I have a sub when I go play here. So yes, yeah. Now that I think about it, yeah, when you look at it that way, I always made sure that I had like a lunch from a store or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. No bag lunch and things like that. So yeah, yeah. So I would say it was just in a different form.
Yeah, but I will say I did have in eighth grade. I had my Hornet starter jacket that I did wear because I was
I
just
had a
like,
Hornet starter jacket too.
it was like mom wasn't paying for one set of clothes for that environment and one set of clothes for home. So it was like, okay, I rather wear the starter jacket with these folks who wear LL Bean and everything else
Yeah.
than wear the LL Bean with my friends on the other side of town who are gonna definitely clown me.
Yep.
So yeah, I had the hat to the back and the starter jacket in my 8th grade field trip photo, but that's neither here nor there. So you mentioned college. Now you talk about your parents really wanting to make sure that you had a different experience and telling you to limit the what is. So I know as an athlete, you're going to be scouted. But were your parents also hammering like college, college, college? Like was that just never in question? You knew that that's the path that you were on.
No, it was really just, they were just elated that I graduated high school.
Mm,
When I graduated, like that was the win for them. It was just like you graduate high school, you won. And then when I started having, college coaches calling and things like that, then it's just like, wow, you're probably going to like, whoo, I'm going to have a son that's going to college now. Um, because they really didn't know what to do, and like FAFSAs and the clearinghouse and all these type of things. But yeah, so that the college part all came from me, and honestly, I never really even thought about it until I started getting interest for to play basketball or or baseball. That's the only reason I'm like, okay, well, I guess I am gonna go to college. And because at that point, obviously I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna make it to professionals and stuff. The same song that a lot of us have, because subconsciously that's what's out there. You're either going to be a servant or you're going to entertain, right?
hmm
And that's what you kind of think. I never really thought that I was going to kind of be something else. It was more like, oh well, then I'll just get a job. I don't know what. If I don't make it, I'll just get a job somewhere. So luckily, going to college, it exposed me to different people, different subjects and things like that I got interested in.
So what wanting the professional athlete path, I presume you wanted that even in college as well.
Yes.
When did it crystallize for you that like, okay, I need to start thinking about an alternative?
Yeah, so like my sophomore year, because being a student athlete is tough, right? You
Mhm.
you pretty much you have no time to yourself. Just like high level, you're waking up at 5 and you have to have 5:30 run. And it's just this is baseball, you have a 5:30 run. And any of my friends, if they listen to this, they'll remember, because sometimes I'll call them out. They're coming from a late party and it's 4 or 5 in the morning. They walking back to campus and they'll see us running and stuff like that. So that's a running joke with some of my frat brothers and things like that. But you wake up at 5, 5:30 you're running, and you're training to like 7. So you get the shower, then you go eat at 8 o'clock, then you got classes, and you got classes to 12, and then 12 you try to run and quickly get lunch, and then you're in practice from 1 to 4 or 5. Then you got to go to night class. Then after that, you got study hall. And then, if you want to put in any extra, and this is every day. And then you got to
Mhm.
do the same thing over and over. So it's really tough, and it's a real grind, and it's an emotional grind, and especially in a sport that isn't predominantly Black, right? Because I'm alone, right? I don't have someone on the team that could necessarily relate to me,
Mhm.
right? So anything that I was going through, a lot of it was just compartmentalized, and it's just me. I'm talking to myself, and my dad, he doesn't understand, right? He has his high school degree, but he was in the streets for the majority of his life. So it's just like, yo, you just got to make it work. You better than them.
Right.
It's just like you you're better than, just make it work. Because then also in our community, it's like, wow, if you could make it, you really could set everyone up, right? So then
Mhm.
it's that pressure and stuff. And if you don't have like all world talent, like like a LeBron James or Alex Rodriguez, Ken Griffey Jr., like people like that, there's a constant grind that you have to have, and you have to put so much work in, and it's mentally taxing, and you still have to have a lot of luck, that it's tough. So it just got to the point to, and I started having injuries, and just physically, and you're recruited. They tell you this one thing: you're this great kid. You're gonna come change the game. And then now, you get there, and then you have to realize, damn, I was really good, in the state of New Jersey. And now you get there, and you got somebody that's from California that was really good, and
Right.
Massachusetts that was really good. So now you have to deal with that. You're like, okay, now everybody's good here. And then the next year, you're a sophomore, but you got other freshmen coming in, so you're dealing with that as well. And just, my boys, I'm able to talk to them like how I feel and stuff, but, they could sympathize, but they can't empathize with me. They don't understand exactly what I'm going to. So myself, one day I just woke up and I just said, I'm just done. Like, just don't want to do it. Like, I really just lost the love, and I went to my coach and I was just like, I'm just going to try to walk on the basketball team and things like that. And he's just like, you're making a big mistake. And, and when I look back, I wish I would have had the support to push me through that point. That was the point where, I needed a mentor so bad, but there wasn't anyone that I could identify, or anyone, my coaches, that they're not thinking about that because they're not wired to think about that. We have this kid that's literally, because I went to Seton Hall, we have this kid literally 2 miles down, from down here. Maybe we should have somebody. Can we identify someone for this kid to be able to talk to that's older, that he could relate? But I didn't have that, to where a lot of my teammates, they had each other, they could understand each other, and they didn't alienate me or anything like that. But it's just certain things that you need to be able to speak to people that understand exactly what you're feeling. And when I try to explain that, a perfect example is like, if a woman tells a man, what it feels like to have a menstrual cycle, right? Like, you could tell me for 100 years, like, what it is, and I'll understand it, but I'll never be able to really understand internally how that feels, right? So there's always that disconnect, and there was a disconnect in an important part of my life that I wish I had. Now, whether or not I would have still continued, who knows? But still, it could have been a point where I was just so down, and, like, I would say, just depressed, because I didn't know myself anymore, because I was always, one of the best, and I was still good at that point, but, just the feedback that I was getting, I wasn't used to it. And I didn't know how to take it. And I just started going through things, like, and I could say I probably, when I look back at it now, I probably was depressed, and then I could, start to trigger, like having injuries and stuff like that, because, you have a lot of stress, and, you're 19 and you're still trying to make your way. And, you still got this set of people who they can't make the decisions to help you, still telling you that you're still this great person, like, yo, you're going to make it and stuff. But then you have the people that are responsible for the decisions and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, you're good, but you're not performing the way that we want you to perform. Or when you do perform, you do great, it's just like, all right, well, do it again tomorrow. And then you start to see the differences, because it's like, I am the only one. Because you always stand out. So
Right.
there's that pressure again, like, I have to be perfect, right? Where I felt like some of my other teammates didn't have to feel that way, right? So then I left. I left, and then now I'm like, okay, this is over, so I need to start figuring it out. So I always felt like I was a very personable person. I like to, be in large crowds, talk and stuff like that. So I got into communications, and then I got my bachelor's degree in PR and communications, or PR and advertising. And, from there, I got to this point to where I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go back. I know I got this degree. I'm going to go back and teach. So I went back and I started teaching at my old elementary school. And I did that for like 2 years. And from there, I was just, the next few years just trying to find who I was, which took took a while, but your journey, you have to go through certain things to get to the point that you want to get to. And I'm happy that I went through that, because it made me the person that I am today.
So thinking about being an elementary school teacher to where your career has evolved to, how did that transition happen out of education?
I, so I'm teaching, right? And I'm a young teacher. I'm teaching. I taught seventh grade social studies 1 year. 1 year I taught eighth grade science. And the first 2 years, like, you're very passionate. I'm 23, 24, and things like that. And the kids, they're responding to me because they can relate to me in some sort of fashion. Like, I, excuse me, I felt like this was the first time where, the first instance to where, like, my generation was that first generation that could relate to the kids that actually like hip hop and things like that, right? Because that's what we grew up in.
Right.
So, I would use that as a way to, like, I would implement it into certain teachings and things like that, or which they found like cool and stuff. And just being able to relate, they would open up, and then they would not want to disappoint me, right? So, and I loved it. But just like financially, I got these loans now, and it's just like, all right, I know I have to go back to school to get my master's and stuff like that. And the reality is, I'm gonna be paying these loans for this amount if I stay as a teacher, and I do X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, I can always go back to teach. So then I'm just like, maybe I need to do something else. So, I transitioned into consulting.
Mm.
So I worked at Accenture, which is a consulting firm. And I did that. It was low level, more of like an assistant to the primary consultants to the different companies and things like that. And it was okay. And then I got into real estate, and then I started doing well. So then, like, for a year, I left that, and I was just like doing real estate for like a year or two. And then like the financial situation happened with real estate. But prior to that, I realized that I wanted to, marry my wife, well, who's my wife now, Stephanie. And I'm like, well, I need some extra cash. So I was like, because at this point I'm working for myself, and then I go, you know what? I need some extra cash. Let me just get a part time or something like that, so
Mm-hmm.
I could help pay for the wedding and things like that, right? And I had a friend, and she's like, oh, I think that you would probably be good in like pharma or whatever. And I'm like, oh, really? I thought you had to be like a scientist. I'm saying this. She's like, well, it's different aspects to it. So many different aspects. So she introduced me to a recruiter, and I spoke to a recruiter, and then I got a position as like a scientific office assistant, right?
Mm.
Basically like an administrative assistant, but I did a lot of activities that was outside of the administrative standpoint, where I'm actually doing tasks related to looking at like things such as protocols, which the protocol is like the journal or the diary for a study designed to run clinical trials and stuff like that. So I'm doing this. I'm like, this is pretty cool. I kind of like this. It was something new. And then that one point where I was like, this is that I want in. I got cool with all the other, admins, and like administrative assistants, they know everything. Like, they
Yes.
know who makes what, who's getting this offer, and things like that. And one day I'm walking, and she goes, "Hey, I gotta show you something." And I saw an offer letter for like a clinical trial manager, and I said, "She's about to make what?" And then she's telling me, and she negotiated this and that and that. And I'm like, can I see her resume? And she's like, yeah. And I look, because now I'm like, what do I need to have, in order? So I looked, I'm like, wow, okay, like, well, she has a biology degree. I don't have a biology degree. But okay. And I'm like, all right, cool. At least I know what I need to do. And I'm like, at this point, it's not my passion, but it's like I see where the money is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I know what clinical managers are doing. And I'm like, yeah, it's stressful, here and there, but for the most part, you coming in at 8, at 4, you leaving and things like that, and you making this amount of money. I want in. That's basically what I'm saying to myself. I want in. And from there, I started, my personal plan. I need to one day become a clinical manager, right? And that's how I transitioned into my current career. So I've been doing this now for 14 and a half years. August of this year, I'll make 15 years.
And I think there's a couple of points to highlight here that are important. Um, you know, oftentimes when you are seen as the great hope, like the one who's going to make it out, there's this inherent pressure, even if it's self-imposed, to figure out the plan and stay the course on that plan. And there's not a lot of space to and like leeway to try this thing and then kind of say, all right, I'm gonna go over here because this is not working. Or you can even hear it from other people, like, okay,
Yep.
so what are you doing? Like, you were teaching, you had Accenture, real estate, like now you're doing this, like what is really happening? Did you
Yeah.
feel any of that you like, okay, I'm not on a specific path here, I'm kind of jumping around, particularly because you had the thought that you were ready to be a husband as well?
Yeah. I don't. So from like my family, think I don't remember feeling it from like my mom or dad, because again, it's like you went to like you like we won. You like we did our job. Like you went to college, like you graduated from high school, you went to college. Like they going around. My son went to Seton Hall. So they good. Now it's at the point to where as long as you don't go to jail, like
Right.
we did our job. But internally, I felt it. And I will say, a lot of my friends, are, they're also excelling in their careers now. And even then, they started to excel. So, like when you want to be around like-minded individuals, you don't want to be the one that's out. So, like I will say, some of, my close friends, because they were excelling, it kind of forced me to always hold myself accountable. And I think that's why it's an important piece to have a good set of people around you, because it forces you to hold yourself accountable, because you always want to still be able to relate, right? When you're hanging out, you want to be able to add to the conversation and things like that. And if you're not keeping up on what's going on, you can find yourself being kind of left out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we will always joke and say, like, I don't want to be the person that if we get a text message 5 years from now, like, yo, I know it's last minute, let's just go to Vegas, I can't go. Because then now that you bro, how we do, like, yo,
Yes.
you broke his head, son, things like that. But you don't want to deal with that, but it's a good thing, because like you're kind of subconsciously holding each other accountable. Their advancements in their career, you're just like, wow, like my good buddy, Jason, he's now the business administrator for Orange Public Schools. But I've known him since I was 8, 9 years old. He's always been, like, I'm not going to depend on anybody. And he grew up the same type of environment as well. But he's always been that person that, like, it always just felt like he always had his stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
So always having him in my life, it always ensured. And then my other buddy, we call him Ro. His name is Romaine. He's like 3 years older, but he was the friend that he instilled in me. He was the one that would always take the chance, like not be afraid. Like he just, this is the opportunity. I'm gonna do it. It's going to work out. Like he always had this self belief in
Mm-hmm.
himself, and that was the quality that I saw at a early age. And again, here's the luck, right? Having the luck to have a friend like Jason, and have a friend like Ro and things like that to be in your life. Because had you did something else, so I went to another school, who's to say I would have had those type of friends to kind of help to instill, and um, so like them doing these things, I'm just like, wow. So yeah, you can like just believe in yourself. Wow, things do like work out, or even if it doesn't work out the way you are, like you'll still be okay, So, and then Jason always just like these are the things that we need to do, or I know I need to do to get to where I want to. And he was sort of like regimented, but boom, like I have 2 master's degrees, but I would have never thought that I could get 2 master's degrees if it wasn't because Jason, he went and got 2 master's degrees. So we were like, bro, you got 2 master's degrees? It's just like, but then you see when he gets these credentials, now all these different opportunities start to happen for him. And, it was well earned. So like I'm around this stuff and I'm just like, I have to stay ahead, but also there's this sort of comfort, like you'll be okay. You can do this. Here are the results. And if it doesn't work out, this is what can happen. And, they're both very, successful. And then, I have other friends that are really successful. My friend Delon, he's, in leadership in HR. Then my other friend, William, he's like a lead consultant for like Cognizant. And he was another person that just showed me about like just hard work as well. So you have these core, like in the individuals where, like just career wise and things like that, they're doing certain things and you kind of want to ensure that you kind of stay at that point as well. So it's very important to have a circle around you of like-minded individuals to you know push you and also show you there's different ways to do it, or things that you've questioned about yourself, and then this is someone that I trust that he just believed in himself, or this is someone that I trust that he has 2 master degrees, and then because he did that, I got 2 master degrees. My friend William, he has 2 master degrees. My friend Delon, he's graduating from Villanova this year with his MS in I think like human resource development and things like that. So it's that network to have in that support system, and then now you have the person when you feel you're questioning yourself, you have someone that can relate and understand exactly how you feel, where I didn't have that when I was 19, right? So,
and I think what's important to highlight too is we often come into these environments, be it academic or professional, which is evident in your story, where we don't have a blueprint. And there's so much mystery around it. Like, so mentioning getting the opportunity to see this offer letter and then saying, let me see the resume to see what the path is that this person took to get here. And the other person having the foresight to tell you, oh, and these are the things that she negotiated. Because that's the other thing. Like
yeah,
we often just get an opportunity and we're like, cool, all right.
cool, yeah, okay, yeah.
It's not exactly what I wanted, but it's better than what I had or what have you, or it's the best offer I've ever seen. So I'm just going to take it, and not realizing that there is flexibility built in. The offer is
Yes,
made with the expectation that you are going to
absolutely.
counter. And also, too, what I appreciate about your story is having a community of Black men that are willing to hold each other accountable, yes, but also say, like, this is what I'm doing. And I find, and it's a cultural thing. We don't talk about money a lot. We don't talk about salary, all of these things, but that openness and candor is necessary for all of us to elevate. And
Yeah,
it wasn't until I started having those conversations personally that I realized, oh, it's better socioeconomically for all of us, for it to say, this is what I'm making, this is the move that I did next,
absolutely.
this is what you should do. I think they're underpaying you, and this is how you should go about it, or go back and get this degree, get this certification. That collective advancement, for that to happen, these conversations need to be happening. and coinciding because
they
they're
absolutely,
happening on the other side of the
yes,
fence. Trust me.
absolutely,
Trust
yes.
me.
No, I totally agree. And like my friend Ro, he was the one that look, I'm making this amount. So now you can realize it and you visualize, wow, you're making this, so this is attainable. Like he never was the type of person where he's doing this and it's just like, yeah, I'm doing okay. No, it's like, look, this is what I'm making. And then now you're like, wow, I can make this. But again, you need that sort of luck to be able to have friends that are kind of like-minded and things like that. And then you also have other friends that it may be for career, but then just other types of like qualities that they would bring, that you just pick different qualities from from your friends and things like that. Because I have other friends, and because they may see this, I'll give them a quick Eric and Eric Thomas, Jackie, and then my boy, Tehran, and like where just like the loyalty, or just certain life lessons, and things like that, where you pick from each friend, and like Eric, Eric and Ro was like the older brother that I never had, right? And Eric was very candid on, like just teaching me about, how to, properly deal with women and things like that, which was important to me at 20 years old, because I'm thinking one thing and he's like, no, but, and I look back and I'm like, wow, he was only like 23 at the time, but like he was, like, hey, no, this is how you're supposed to treat a woman, and this is how you talk to them. Always be truthful and things like that. And Jackie, the same thing. And my fraternity brothers, I had a community of even older, individuals that I was able to finally, one, relate to, but they were older and they kind of already had years on me where they already experienced things, to where I can learn from, those lessons as well. And, I think that's one of the things, just when you look at a community of Black men and stuff like that, that it doesn't get as much exposure, because it is out there.
Mm-hmm.
But like with media and society and social media and things like that, we tend to look at the negative, right? Of like, but it's just so much, even outside of my personal, like my friends and stuff. I know guys that I'm cool with, that they also have, a community of Black men that are doing well and things like that. And we all have, our issues and things like that. That's just life. But it's a lot more out there that's like that then that's being perceived, in my opinion.
Right. So taking it back to the education piece and these 2 degrees that
Yeah.
you and multiple friends have gotten, 2 master's degrees, and now you are working on your PhD.
Yes.
How did you come to the decision to say, okay, I'm going back again and I'm gonna lock this doctorate down?
Okay, so there was a instance that happened, right? Because it's always an instance. So I got to the point to where, now I have my 2 master degrees, I have my MBA and my MS, and I'm doing well. It's easy for me to, for the most part, any job that I really want, if I apply for it, I'll at least for the most part get the interview. For the most part, obviously, sometimes it's like, oh, your credentials don't meet the requirements, but I would get the interview, and I would do pretty well. And, I was able to get the job that where I was like, oh, I really want this one. Right. And then it comes to a point to where, I'm doing well in my career. And then this opportunity comes. I get this recruiter reaches out to me. We have this perfect position. It's for a VP of this company. And I'm like, oh, wow, you'll be the VP of clinical operations, reporting to the chief operating officer. I'm like, and then I look at the requirements and I'm like, whoa, it says that you need 20 years of experience. At that point, I only had, like 12, 12, 11, 12 years. And they're like, well, you have a lot of global experience. You know what, let's just have a call. So I had a preliminary call with the recruiter, and she's like, oh yeah, we got to get you on. So then I interviewed with the CEO. It was a smaller, biotech. And I interviewed with the CEO, and And here's the crazy thing, right? So he had to go to Israel. They wanted to make a decision. So he's leaving for Israel. So I spoke to the recruiter on Thursday. He's leaving to Israel on Monday. So he's like, I need to speak to him ASAP. The only way it was going to work was for me to meet him at his condo in Jersey City, right? Mind you, I live in Central Jersey on a Sunday.
Oh gosh.
So I interviewed with this guy. He had there's like an auditorium in a condo in Jersey City. So I'm interviewing, with him. He has me on the stage. There's like a podium and things like that. And not that he's like you need to, but it was just how it was just set up, right? So I'm driving up there and I'm like, wow, for them to want me to interview right now on a Sunday, like it's looking good,
Right.
So I interview. He's like, I'm very impressed. Literally the next day, she's like, we need you to interview with the chief operating officer ASAP, right? He's like, this kid, he has what it takes. So I interview with her, and it doesn't go. I felt like it didn't go as well as with the CEO, but she was the one that was actually making the decision, right? And I could tell it went okay, but it like I knew I blew his mind, right? So then, so this is Tuesday. This is Tuesday. So I interview with her Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, their HR calls me, and we're negotiating. So I'm like, oh, it's a sure shot, right? So we're negotiating, and they're saying these numbers, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, I can't but believe, like I can't even imagine like this.
That's when you start calculating how you're going to allocate the money.
I'm already spending it now. And that was my fault because I'm already spending it, right? Like in 3 years, house paid off. I'm doing, like it's already spent, right? And because that's what we do. Right?
That's what we do. We get out the calculator we start calculating tax deductions and everything before the offer's on the table.
Exactly. And then so I'm doing that, and they're like, because the timelines are accelerated, like if they pick you or not, like we just need to know, right? So then I hear from the recruiter, and then she's like, just to let you know, it's down to you and this other person, right? So then I don't hear from them from a week. So I'm like, damn, because they like, oh, this is accelerated. I don't hear from a week, and then the following week I follow up, and she was like, oh, I was just about to reach out to you. They didn't go with you. They really loved you. It was really, really tough, and they had to, like, it was to the point to where they just had to find something wrong with someone, and it was like, this person had a PhD and you didn't. So now I'm like, it's 3 weeks. I'm just like pressing, Stephanie, she's just like, it's okay. Everything happens for a reason and things like that. And I had always wanted to go back for my PhD. And then I just couldn't find what I wanted to do. And I was like, I'm just not going to go back just to have it. I want to have something that I'm passionate about. And for a couple of years, I was just like, well, maybe this. And then I just wasn't feeling it. So after that happened, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to give them the opportunity to say it's because I don't have my doctorate. Now I got to get my doctorate, because now it's not credentials now. Like the credentials are out of the equation when you're saying, well, you don't have this. And I'm just like, you know what? I need to figure out what I want to get my doctorate in.